Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. Now, this is a show all about helping you deliver e-commerce wow, as we like to say, helping you do e-commerce just a bit better than maybe you are right now. Maybe you're looking for help. I don't know the reason why you're here. But if it's like me, I also run my own e-commerce businesses and I just want to learn, I want to grow, I want to scale, I want to do all those amazing things. So we get to chat to amazing people like today's guest, Mr. Steven Pemberton from Elevatum, about his incredible journey in building successful e-commerce brands. The good news is I've got my pen, I've got my paper, I'm going to take notes. I'm a bit old school, a bit analog, but I'm going to take some notes and hopefully learn some things along with your good selves as well. So welcome to the show. If this is your first time with us, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Why not like, subscribe, and do all of that sort of good stuff so you can stay connected with us, because we have amazing conversations every week with fabulous e-commerce folk from around the world. And if you are subscribed to the newsletter, all of the notes and links will be coming straight to your inbox. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, go to ecommercepodcast.net and subscribe today. And all we do is just email you once a week with the notes from the show. And of course, you can get all the notes and the links just by scrolling down in your podcast app as well. I'm not naive enough to think that most people don't do that, because that's what I do when I listen to podcasts. I don't know actually what platform you're listening to your podcast on, but I want to give a shout out to Snipped. Snipped is a really interesting platform. They're not sponsoring the show. Maybe they should. But Snipped is a really interesting platform to listen to podcasts on, because what it does, right, if you're listening to the show and you're out walking the dog, or, you know, I like to go for walks and listen to podcasts, or I'm in the workshop, you know, over a weekend listening to them. And I think, oh man, that was really good what they said, but I've not got the ability to take notes. What Snip does is you press a button and it sort of takes from the transcript that bit of text and it sends it you as a note using AI. I love it. It means you can make notes on podcasts. So do try out Snipped, although it's spelt funny, because everything cool and kitsch has to be spelt funny, doesn't it? Snipd. I'm just looking at it on my phone. Yeah, and it looks like that is what it does. So go check that out, Snipped. Okay, enough of a free advertisement to a podcast player. Let's talk about Steven, who is a faith-based, successful business owner with not one, but two thriving e-commerce stores. Because one, as we know, is never enough. Each boasting 7 figures in revenue. And now he helps other businesses that have plateaued in e-commerce sales scale from 6 to 7 figures and beyond with his company, Elevatum. Steven, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you on. How are we doing today, good sir?
Matt, thank you so much for having me. I'm great. I'm excited to be here. Honestly, your podcasting voice, I just have to say, is immaculate.
Wow, that's a good way to start the podcast. Butter up the podcast host. Well, thank you very much. We've worked hard on it. But my son, actually, I should probably not say this on the podcast airwaves, but my son, who is in his early 20s now, whilst he was at uni, would inevitably end up doing bits and bobs for the podcast, you know, some editing and stuff like that. And he has learned how to mimic my podcast voice. And so when we're sitting around the table, he'll just turn into podcast dad. And I find it quite funny.
I love that.
And yeah, so does he. He finds it quite funny as well, actually. But apparently I have a podcast voice. But so it's kind of you to say. Thank you very much. Whereabouts in the world are you?
So I'm smack dab in the middle of the United States in Oklahoma.
Ah, the musical.
Yes.
Very good. And are you an Oklahoma native, or are you an import?
No, I'm an import. So I'm originally from Tennessee. Tennessee is much prettier than Oklahoma. Oklahoma is very flat. But one thing that Oklahoma does have is they have beautiful skies. Yes. Where I'm from in Tennessee, honestly, the sky's the same everywhere, but how you see it is different. It's all about perspective. And in Tennessee, I just had a lot of mountains around me, so I wasn't able to see what we like to call here in Oklahoma, big sky country. So being here, the sunsets are amazing. The sunrises are also just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, no doubt. I've never actually been to Oklahoma. I have been to Tennessee. I have been. Are you talking about the mountains between Tennessee and North Carolina?
Yes.
Beautiful part of the world. I think I may have mentioned this before on the podcast. It's something that I like to admit to. I have also been to Dollywood, which is in those said mountains.
I love Dollywood.
Dollywood is phenomenal, by the way. If you're wondering whether you should go, yes, you should.
Yes.
Especially if you like Dolly's music. But listen, before we digress too far, tell us a little bit then about these two e-com businesses which you've built and sold. What were they?
Yes. So one of them was actually, I got to give a lot of credit to my wife on this one because she is the one who spearheaded it back in 2018. And at that time, I was actually working a corporate job. And we had a business when we got married very young. And that was back in 2014. We were working in MLM. We had no idea what we were doing. I quit my job. She quit her job. We lost everything super fast. So fast forward to 2018 when she's saying, hey, Steven, I think I want to do this thing. My mom had actually reached out to her and said, hey, here's this Amazon thing I've been doing for a few months. Do you want to join me? And I told my wife, I said, absolutely not. I finally started working my way up the corporate ladder. I was making enough money for her to be a stay-at-home mom and to do all the things that she wanted to do. We were able to take vacations, do all the fun stuff. So I said, why would we go back into business? I just had a very tainted view of business. And so my wife, being the amazing woman that she is, she did it anyway. She did not listen to me. She just decided, hey, I'm going to do it anyways, despite who you are and what you're saying to me. And what was really interesting was watching her progress, because honestly, I was not a very supportive husband. I was the direct opposite, and she did it anyways. And I just remember one day, because I was working on average 14 hours a day. So I just thought I was doing everything and then some. So one day I come home and I just worked a 14-hour shift and she was still up. And then the next morning I wake up and she was already up working. And I went, okay, so let me do the math. That means she at least has worked at 17 hours straight. And so I realized very quickly that just because the paycheck from her side wasn't as big as mine did not mean that she was not outworking me in every other statistical category. So I decided to start helping her out around the house. And I watched her go from someone who was she would get a 1-star review on Amazon and cry and get an A to Z claim, or something would happen, get just any of those things that would happen in a normal e-commerce business. And it would just devastate her to within a year. So by 2019, that business went to $1 million a year. And what was interesting is that really set us up going into 2020. And I also love to be very clear, especially for e-commerce founders who are listening to this, is we made $1 million top line sales. That was not in our banking account. So
it'd be nice if it was.
Yes, it would have been. But we were at 10% profit margin, so we didn't make a lot. Plus, we had a financial backer that took half of it because we didn't know how to structure deals or do any of those things back then. So we made less than I was making in a corporate job. And in my corporate job, I didn't have to have 4 employees and all this overhead. Like, that was handled through the job. So in 2020, right before the world shut down, we decided that we were going to take that business back down to the ground level and restructure everything so we could just boost the profit margins.
Right.
And what was fascinating about that, 2020 in June, I decided to quit that job, and we went all in on the Amazon business because we had figured out how to boost those profit margins. We were up around 25%. And by August, I thought, okay, we're going to do great. Now we're doing more. We're doing more. We're making more money. And then in August, Amazon decided that they wanted to shut us down because we had used someone to get a shipment. And what was interesting is that they were selling us wholesale shipments, and it was $15,000. They had the lifestyle, right? So they were on Instagram showing how they've been doing it. They've done wholesale for a long time. And we decided to trust them with $15,000. So we got that shipment in. And the thing was they had express authority to sell that stuff, but we didn't. So because we were selling it and we didn't have the authority to sell it, that we got shut down. Huge thing. We're $100,000 in debt, no income. Now I'm stressed out. I'm just like, okay, this is the end of my life. And it was fascinating. Within the next 60 days, we ended up going on to Shopify. This is where, for me, things really changed. It was because we went on to Shopify, and our main channel at that time was Facebook. So Facebook Shops, Facebook Marketplace, channeling it all in through Shopify, mainly focused in home goods. And what ended up happening was that first month in business, we made $5,000 profit. By the end of that year, so that was the end of 2020, and we were able to help 33 underprivileged kids have Christmas. Within 6 months of starting the business, we were back up to $100,000 a month in revenue, By the end of 2021, it was $1 million business, and we were able to help 137 underprivileged kids have Christmas. And that was us buying all the presents, wrapping them all, delivering them all. And that was about a $50,000 project. So it was really amazing to do those things. And it was just incredible to watch how you can shift skill sets. Like, this is something I talk about a lot, is people get so encapsulated in, well, I got to make this business successful. It's like, but if you look at Google kills off their little mini businesses and mini ventures all the time. But the thing is that they shift personnel, but they also shift skill sets. So you may be learning in your e-commerce business, and maybe it's not thriving to the point you want it to yet, and you're learning what you need for what's coming up next.
That's super fascinating. So tip number 1, listen to your wife.
Yes,
I think is fair to say. And I would probably echo that sentiment, Stephen. I'm not going to lie. Always listen to the good lady wife, because she genuinely knows best. I'm curious, why did your mum get started in Amazon? Was this just something she picked up? Was it a YouTube video she watched? Was it a course that she did? Because it's quite an unusual thing for you. I'm just thinking about my mum. If my mum called me and said, I've started an Amazon business, it wouldn't be a natural thing for her to do. Do you know what I mean? And so I'd be kind of like, really? How does that come about? And so I'm curious, how did your mum get involved in Amazon?
So first and foremost, I want to say I've been on well over 100 podcasts, and I've said a similar story to this, and no one has ever asked me that question. And no one ever. And I love this question because it's fascinating. Like, you're diving a little bit deeper than most people ever would. And my mom has always been a serial entrepreneur ever since I was very young. And at that time, when I was young and growing up, it didn't make any sense to me. And my dad was always against her the same way that I was against my wife. And my mom would always just go from one thing to another thing to another thing. So what she did, it was in 2017. She had gotten into Amazon because I think she had discovered it through YouTube. And she did private labels. So she wanted to make her own brand. And she did. And what was fascinating is she makes her own brand. It was basically STEM toys before STEM toys was a big deal. And she started making pretty good sales, but she didn't know how to scale. So she just tried more products, more things. And that unfortunately led her to where, when she contacted my wife, she didn't know what to do. She just decided, instead of trying to scale up this one business model on Amazon, she was just going to completely shift and go into a whole different business model. And that's when my wife came into play, because my wife had done the cardinal sin with social media, and she had made a post just talking about how awful her life is and how unfulfilled she was, because my wife is the hardest working person I know, and she's wicked smart. So for her, that was something that really, really bothered her. So when my mom came in and made her that offer, she was all in.
Wow. And so is your mum still involved in Amazon?
Not anymore. She's still in the e-commerce side, but she's not as focused on the Amazon anymore. Just because we've dealt with Amazon for so long. Amazon, I think, is great. If you build a brand and you start on Amazon, then I think it's great to stay there until you scale it to a certain level. Then you can have things like Shopify and do different levers. But for me, what I've seen just from being in Amazon for as long as we were, I would rather start on a Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, whatever you want to do, because then you can control the list. The thing with Amazon is you cannot control the customer list. Like, there's no way for you to directly attribute an upsell. Sure, you can do PPC and different things, but Shopify and these different platforms, they give you more levers to pull on to make your brand successful. And the thing about Amazon is, yes, they are basically second to Google when it comes to search engines and all these things. And I love that. But if you don't have the right strategy to get into the flow of what people are looking for, it doesn't matter. Like, your stuff isn't going to get found unless you actually know how to set up that strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? I think Amazon is in itself now so complicated and so competitive that I don't have any hard data, because I can't say I've ever gone to look for it, to be honest with you, but it sort of anecdotally feels like it's actually probably easier now to just not do Amazon as your first thing. Whereas a few years ago, you go, well, man, the e-commerce space is hyper competitive, right? You've got to bid on Facebook, on Google, and all that. There's so much going on, and it's expensive. So go to Amazon because it was cheap at the time. And I think it almost feels like, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Stephen, and feel free to disagree, obviously, but it almost feels like it's sort of switched somewhat.
Yes, I would absolutely agree. Just because, and it is an unfortunate thing. I think that e-commerce as a whole, Amazon, no, not Amazon, it's a business. So you have to have the right skill sets. You have to have the right understanding of what you're getting into. And if you hear the leaf blowers in the background, I apologize. But for me, I've seen it. I had somebody reach out to me and they asked me to talk to their son because their son had just invested his whole life savings in Amazon. And he had only made 2 sales, and both of them were to this guy and to this guy's, or from this guy to his mom and to his dad. That was it.
Wow.
And so when I talked to him, he said, man, I've been learning and studying and watching YouTube videos for the last 3 years. And then I got into Amazon. And what was so unfortunate about that was he invested all of this money into it. And it didn't make any sales because he didn't know how to actually get into the flow of traffic.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon problem, isn't it? It's a shame in some ways. I still see the videos on YouTube doing well, and I kind of think it's not actually as easy as you make it out to be now, guys. It really isn't. It's a lot more complicated, and you've got to have much deeper pockets. Trust me, I know. Building brands on Amazon, we're building. We obviously, I say obviously, we are building our own brands on Amazon. I know the depth to which I've got to put my hands in the pockets to make that thing work, right? But it's nothing, and what the sales that we have on Amazon are nothing really compared to the sales that we're having through the web store. And I would say new customer acquisition is cheaper outside of Amazon. I would say new customer acquisition is easier in some respects outside of Amazon. And I would also say that the value of the transaction outside of Amazon is greater, not in terms of just profits, but in terms of, like you say, I now know who that customer is, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm exactly the same mindset that you are. I believe now Amazon is it's very difficult to get into. So this is something we talked about offline, but there's a brand that I'm even working with now that they really were fighting me hard on if they should have their Amazon and do PPC for Amazon, but yet they were not profitable in general. And they were making $30,000, $40,000 a month. And I told them, I said, Amazon, you don't need to do it. I said, there's not a reason for us to invest time, energy, resources to it if you do not have one sustainable marketing channel right now to acquire customers. And everyone wants to think that it's a subsidiary. So it's like, well, if I'm running Amazon or if I'm running Meta ads and people go Google me or whatever it is, then they find me on Amazon, then they're going to buy there. Maybe. But the thing to think about with Amazon, the way that we were successful the first time on Amazon was we leveraged a lot of other people's stuff. It was not our own brand. So we would go do a lot of wholesale. We're doing a lot of retail arbitrage. So, I mean, if you're selling, skincare and it's a well-known brand, you're on their listing, you have 3,000 reviews for that listing, then people don't even realize that they're not buying from the brand. They just think they're buying straight from the brand, but realistically, they could be buying from me. Now, if you have your own skincare line and they go to your listing and it has 0 reviews or it has 2 and it's only at 4 stars, they're much less likely to buy because there's no authority piece for them to say, oh yeah, this is a trusted brand, let me buy from them. And I think that that's what because you can control the narrative a little bit better on your own website. You can have your own testimonials. You can have a founder story. You can have different levers to pull than you will on Amazon. Amazon is very much just like Google. I'm going to Google it. Let me look at the first 3 to 10 results, find the one that works best for me. On Amazon, same thing. If you're not on the first page, it's much less likely for you to get a high number of sales. Yeah. And then if you are on the first page, then your stuff will probably have a lot of reviews, and most likely you got to have brand safety. There's just a lot of things you have to put into consideration when it comes to Amazon. And so for us, Shopify and building out our own websites has been the key. And that's what we've done with other brands as well, because I want them to understand that it's not just about how to get the first customer. The thing about Amazon that I've noticed is unless you have a renewable, so something that somebody has to buy every single month or every few months, then they're not going to come back. And if they do, you don't really know if they did. Like, there's not enough data there for you to understand. It's like, okay, they bought it at 35. They came back in 6 months. They bought again. It's the same customer. When you're doing it through something like a Shopify or using different tools like Triple Whale, you can actually track exactly, this is the lifetime value of this customer. It cost me $200 to acquire them for a $35 product. seems like I lost money until you realize that now in 1 year they've spent $2,000 with me. So those things matter more to me. And I've learned that over time, being an e-commerce founder, working with brands, is knowing your data and analytics and how to use that to better your brand profit-wise.
So if there was, just talking about the data and the analytics then, if there was one metric that meant, how do I phrase this, that means more to you than any other metric maybe, what would that one right at the top of the tree be?
That's a fantastic question. So I would say right now, the one that I've seen matter the most is your average order value. And so I would say it's a toss up between that and your lifetime lifetime value, lifetime gross profit of a customer. It's definitely between those two, but especially if you're a brand looking to get from 10K a month to 30, 40, 50K a month, the thing to look at the most, you probably haven't been around long enough to fully understand the lifetime value of a customer anyways. So that metric isn't going to get used as much. I think the thing to really think about is your average order value, and understanding that if you have 100 customers and you get 100 customers a month, the thing that you can change is how much they're buying for. So maybe that means you got to increase your price. Maybe that means you have to run a discount where they buy one, get one 50% off if your margins are there in the product. Maybe that is having some kind of upsell, whatever it is to get them to buy more in one go. It gives you more flexibility to spend more to acquire them in the future. So average order value is one of those things that it can be the same amount of customers. Like if you have 100 customers come in per month and you, on average beforehand, it was $35, you're making $3,500. But if it's 100 customers at $350, you're making significantly more money. So it's just understanding what the right things to do, the right things to position to get that average order value up.
Yeah, it's such a powerful number, isn't it? The average order value. What strategies then have you used to increase average order value yourself? What are some of the things that you've seen and gone, man, that's been really good? That really worked well.
So I'll use a real example. There's a brand that I'm working with that their hero product, which just means the thing they sell the most of, is a $35 shoe wear. So $35 is not a crazy amount of money, but what is interesting is that their profit margin for them, their all-in cost of goods is $3. So their all-in cost of goods is $3. So they're making really good money on that. Good.
Yeah.
So the thing is, though, is they thought the best way to get their average order value up was to create more things around it. I want to do print on demand. So I'm going to have shirts and I'm going to have hoodies and I'm going to do pants and I'm going to do all these other things. And maybe they'll buy those too. But I looked back over the last 14 months of their business, 98.9% of customers come for the footwear. So that means that no one is buying anything else. So if that is the case, then if we're going to focus everything on the footwear, what can we do? Well, we can have them buy one, get the second one 50% off, and you're still in good profit. And what happens is the mindset behind, well, I can get two for $50 instead of just buying one for $35. And the quality is good. It's got great reviews. It's got all these authority pieces. And we watched that in the last 2 days. It took their average order value from being about $36, $37 to in the last 2 days, it's up over $70 on their average order value. It's doubled. And their conversion rate has tripled. And what's very fascinating is we did some market research before doing this and just looking at the best potential customer. So I think this is something for smaller brands as well. You actually have to understand who you're selling to. Not everyone is going to be a customer for your product. So for them, is they just thought that they were selling to everyone in this specific demographic, but realistically, they just need to target this one smaller niche inside of this demographic. It's older ladies, and what we found is targeting older ladies. The thing that they care most about is not necessarily the price. They care more about the comfort. So is the quality good? Does it have arch support? Oh, it does. And I can buy one because they have multiple colors of this. I can buy one in one color and I can get the other one 50% off. And then we watch that we're watching that crush right now. So having an understanding of your actual customer, first and foremost, is going to give you insight into what they want to increase the average order value. Maybe you're in a spot where you are doing skincare and you only have one thing, you have foundation. And then you go, okay, well, maybe you add lipstick because they're asking for that. But go ask. Like if you have customers already, instead of just brainstorming and saying, well, what do we want to sell, is actually asking them, what do they want to buy? Okay, we've got 5,000 customers. Talk to them. Send them an email. Hey, we'll give you 10% off your next order. We just wanted to get your insight on this, this, and this. Ask them 3 questions. Give them 10% off. And getting real data. Because then if you have real data that 90% of people said that they want the same exact thing but in a different color, now it's going to save you on labor cost, on shipping cost, on production, to not get something else made because you were maybe going into hoodies or whatever else. Maybe you just did another color. And that saves you, that not only saves you money, but it's going to make you more money because that's the thing that everyone's asking for.
That's so smart. I like that. I mean, the footwear example is really interesting, isn't it? That the T-shirts and the hoodies and all that sort of stuff didn't really sell. And you would logically think, well, if I'm selling lots of shoes, I'm going to sell lots of hoodies or socks or whatever, that kind of thing. And I think I've seen a lot of people actually do that and then get despondent when it didn't work.
Yep.
And invest a lot of money into it and go, oh, this is not working. Whereas I would view it as, well, actually, that particular thing didn't work. You need to tweak something somewhere needs to be better. And so what's interesting is you're doing this sort of buy one, get 50% off. I suppose my initial question there, Stephen, I'd been slightly skeptical because, I am British after all. Are you not robbing Peter to pay Paul in the sense of giving such a big discount on the second product? It doesn't sound necessarily that's like what you found, but I know people will want me to ask that question.
Yeah, great question. So no. And the reason why is because not only did it increase the average order value, it increased the overall net revenue, and it increased the profit margin. So what we saw as a whole wasn't just an increase in the amount per order. It was an increase in the orders. It was an increase in how much money that it made. And it was an increase in conversion rate just from changing one thing. So this is something else to think about is, yes, let's say we would have just kept it at the $35 and we just continue to run ad spend to it. Beforehand, it was at their best day was at a 1.86% conversion rate. After making this one change, their conversion rate has been on average over the last few days at a 3.5. So almost double. So for the same amount of traffic, you're getting twice as many sales. So that's something else to consider too, is it does seem like in the short term, if you look at it from a macro perspective, it's like, oh, you're just taking a little bit of money here and just kind of moving it somewhere else. But actually for the same amount of traffic, we're instead of just getting one, we're getting two. So a huge difference. And that's why, and it's not only just getting two, we're getting them to pay us more for those two. So now we actually have more money to spend to acquire more people. So it's really interesting how that one change impacted the whole system as a whole.
Yeah, no, it's very clever, very clever. And I like this idea of, if you have an idea, go away and test it before you order a lot of stock. Yes. One of the things that I've seen actually work well is people put pre-orders on their website. So you go, right, well, I'm going to sell, I've got my foundation skincare, so now I'm going to do moisturizer or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So, or lipstick. So you go, right, well, listen, guys, we're going to do this lipstick. It's on pre-order. And you can... Because I've found, I don't know about you, I've found that if I do surveys, I get certain amounts of information out of people. But usually the information they give me is information they think I want to hear, right? I've always found that sort of problem with surveys. Unless you actually get on the phone and talk to them for like 30, 40 minutes where you can dig into the weeds a little bit. What I have found work well and seen work well is when you go, right, we're going to put this on pre-order. And see, you don't actually take any money off people. You just sort of see how many people will actually click that button and go through to the next page. And you kind of go, well, now we're starting to actually gather some hard actual evidence here of people who would have clicked the buy now button. Now we know on the rest of the website that X% of people that click that button will end up buying and Y% won't. So if I extrapolate that out, I then can decide whether or not this product's a winner or not, right?
I think that's super smart. It's basically the wish list strategy where, hey, we're coming out with this. You can wish list it now, so you will be the first one to know when it launches. This is something that we've talked about with an apparel brand, even here locally where we live. They have a very big following. They have they have over 1 million. I would say total on all of their platforms, they have well over 2 million followers. Wow. And these are pretty ravenous customers. They want to buy stuff. And for some reason, this apparel brand, they do terrible when it comes to launches. They just don't do it very often. And they don't make their stuff very easy to buy. It's very difficult for you to actually acquire any of their apparel, so they aren't making the sales that they want to. And the thing is that if they had a consistent way to do drops, so if they wanted to come out with a collection, instead of just coming out with the collection and saying, hey, we have this new collection, which is what most people do, is have your normal baseline stuff that you've been selling and say, hey, this is, we have this idea. And if you have a social media following, I'll just throw this out there, is especially if you do have some kind of new creative that you want to test for ads, something you want to do for your apparel line, if you have it, just make a post. Make a post and see how well it engages. Because if you get really good engagement and then you can go, okay, so these people really engage with this. Now that would probably make a pretty good eye-catching ad when you run ads. The thing is true. It's also true is that if you do this with your creatives to see if people would buy that apparel, is, hey, we're thinking about coming out with this collection. Here's some of our mock-ups, whatever it is. And if people engage with it well, then you can do the wish list where it's, hey, it's on our website. This is a launch that we're going to have. And hey, hush, hush, it's only for the people who wish list. So for the people who wish list, when you get in, when the collection launches, you get 24 hours before anyone else gets in, or you get 3 hours before anyone else gets in to buy this. So then you're making this exclusivity, you're making it scarcity. So when they wish list it, if you have 100 people that wish listed for it, they're going to be more likely to actually come back and do something because they know that they have access that no one else is going to have. And I think that that's just one of those little caveats that I would encourage people who do that strategy to just add in, is that it's just like a couple hours, just adding in a couple hours where they are the only ones who get access to it, because that's going to make it to where everyone wants to wish list for it. They're going to get into it. You only have a certain amount of quantity. So those things are going to sell out. And then if it doesn't, then it goes to your general public, everyone else that can buy it. And that's going to save you a lot on ad spend, because you're not going to have to really run ads to that. That's people who are going to just wish list every time you do some kind of new drop, some kind of new collection. And that gives you really good insight onto what people are looking for before you ever make it.
Yeah, no, that's very clever. I love that. Really great strategy, the wish list strategy. And I can see that working very well with things like apparel brands. And especially if you do like limited quantity runs. Scarcity is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And that fear of missing out, the whole psychology of that, I think, is quite intriguing when it comes to clothing brands. So I can see how that wish list strategy would work super well, you know, and you, I'm going to steal that one, Steve. So what are you seeing at the moment in e-commerce? What are some of the, if there was like, if you had a magic wand, you know, izzy wizzy, let's get busy kind of a thing, and you could fix one key problem that you see over and over again in e-commerce with your clients, with the you know, with what you're doing, what would it be?
Oh, so again, fantastic question. If there was one thing, I would say, just right off the top of my head, I would say taking more time to actually understand who your actual ideal customer is. I think so often in e-commerce, we think we know who they are, but what happens is instead of actually focusing on knowing them better, we just decide to make more products. We decide to run more marketing, and then we are upset with our results in the end. We're upset that our cost to acquire customers is too high. We're upset we're not getting the results that we want to. But did we take enough time to actually understand who they are? The same thing with this brand. They've been in business for the last 4 years. So they've sold they have over 12,000 customers. So they had an understanding that they said, this is who our ideal customer is. When I went and I looked at it, and me and my business partner went and looked at their business, actually did a little bit of digging around, talking to people who they thought was their ideal customer, what we found was it was a subset of those people. And what happens if you find the right subset, and then you have the right marketing creative, whether that's a static image, a video, and the right copywriting to go along with it, you can just print money almost, because those people are going to say, they're speaking directly to me. And I think what happens, if there was one thing I would change, is people hear the terminologies. Things change all the time with Facebook. And so they go, oh, we're just going to go broad. You know, we have the advantage sales campaigns now, which is just, well, you click a few buttons and you launch your campaign, and it's super broad. But the thing is that may be broad, but who you speak to needs to be very, very targeted. So if you can speak directly to their pain, like if you can speak directly to someone who is in college that they are failing class and they know that they failed class and have to move back home, that their parents are going to kick them out and they're going to be homeless. If you can find exactly what their pain points are, and then you can inverse it by saying, hey, are you this person? Are you dealing with this? And here's a way to not deal with that. this is exactly how you handle that. And also just the concept of doing that, but also not trying to sell with every single piece of ad that you have, marketing, social media content, because there's a statistic that out of the 100% of people, there's really only about 10% of people who are ready to buy now. Like they're ready to buy from you right now. So how do you leverage the other 90% of people? There's another maybe 10, 20% of people they're kind of looking around, but they're not really in the buying mood yet. And then you have probably another 70, 80% that they're just not ready to buy. They don't know that they're not problem aware. So putting things up, whether if you have the budget, doing it through your ads, it's going to be faster. If you don't have the budget, doing it through your social media content, however you want to do it on your website, just making people problem aware. They may have a problem they just don't know they're aware of yet. And because then what happens, you make them problem aware, they go down that funnel, they become the 10, 20% who are more likely to at least know they have a problem, looking for a solution. And if you were the one who's at least told them they had a problem, you become the solution. So then your cost to acquire a customer is going to be significantly less over the lifetime of your business. But I would just say getting hyper specific about who your customer is, their pain, what are they actually looking for? How can my product be the solution to that pain? And if it's not, then how can I make my product better? But I think that those are the questions that a lot of business owners kind of shy away from because they just want to make money. But if you get hyper specific about them, about their needs, then you can make so much more money because you're actually dealing with a problem.
Yeah. No, it's super great. How do you know them better? I think is a great phrase that you use. Know them better. And over the years, I've found that actually we get to know our customers, and then we kind of don't do it again. But customers evolve and change, don't they? And a customer today looks, I think, different to a customer 2 years ago, and we have to know them better.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you do that? How do you go and find out more about them? I mean, you found for your client a sort of subset and a niche or a niche from
either
American
way.
Cousins. Either way, or Nikkei, as a friend of mine calls it. But how did you do that? How do people find out what these ideal customers are?
So that's a great question. There's a few different ways to do it. There's actually one is similar to what I was saying earlier is you can reach out to your past customers. You can reach out to people on social media if you have any kind of following. It really doesn't matter. I think when people hear a following, they think they have to have 100,000 or 1 million followers. You can have 1,000, but if those people are engaging, you have 5, 10 people who like your posts, just asking them questions about it. Asking them questions like, hey, what about this you actually like? Hey, why do you keep engaging? I keep seeing you over and over again. Is this something you would actually buy? And just asking real questions and letting them off the hook. This is something I've learned too, is you got to let people off the hook. Hey, I just want to ask a couple questions and feel free to tell me that you don't like it. Feel free to tell me no.
Yeah.
And because then they're not going to feel so bad. It's like, I honestly wouldn't buy this because I don't like X, Y, and Z, or I don't trust the website or whatever it is. That's a very low cost way to do it. Another way to do it, there's a pretty cool platform called PickFu. PickFu is a pretty neat platform where you can basically do these different tests, these different surveys anonymously. So people don't know it's you, they don't know it's your brand. And you can put it in front of, let's say you have pets, like you do pet supplies. You can put it in front of pet owners, and you can be very specific. I want to put it in front of dog owners, in front of cat owners. And then when you put your brand in front of them, they're going to be able to pick from a variety of different brands. So you get to control that too. If it's packaging, you can have your packaging against 3 of your biggest competitors. And most of the time in that case, you might not win. And that's okay. If yours is like the lowest, then you can say, oh, I need to improve. Why is this one the highest? And then you do another test with a couple other competitors and this one that won again. And you say, oh, this one won again against these other people as well and me. So now I get to understand that there's something about their packaging. There's something about how they do their marketing that speaks to them. There's something about their copywriting. And then you get to actually study, because a lot of people will talk about doing competitor analysis. I don't think that's super important in the beginning, because realistically, if you don't understand your customer really well, you don't know who your competitor is. Like you and I can both be chiropractors, but if you only specialize in helping people that are 70 and above, and I work with people who are student athletes, we're not direct competitors. We're in the same industry, but we're not the same. So understanding that customer first, and again, doing it. And you can, if you have the ad spend, you can do it through paid marketing, and you can just do a lot of tests. And this is how a lot of people, as they scale their business, they'll do it. So they'll do a test on the audience. So their audience will be much more honed in. And what that'll mean is their targeting is different. So they'll get very detailed. I want this person in this place. The behavior is they're an engaged shopper. Maybe they are engaged. They're married. They're whatever it is. And then the copywriting is going to be different. And the way that you just do a really good test is you got to keep some aspect of it the same. So if your audience is different, keeping all the creatives the same to just see, did it work better with this audience? And then if the audience is the same, then you got to change one piece of your creative. One problem I've seen with brands is they'll just change everything and just see if it works better. But how do you know what worked?
Yeah.
You don't. But if you change the headline and that's the only thing that changed, but yet your ads perform better, then you know that was the thing that drove it to do better. If the next thing you change, so you found your winners, you test again, you change the main body of text, and now it performs worse, then you know that the other text did better. It's not super difficult, but it's also, you got to be very detailed in what you're changing, know what you're changing to actually be able to read what's happening. But those are just a few different ways that you can go about actually finding those people and communicating with them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really, really good. And I expand, if you don't mind. You said earlier about don't try and sell with every ad.
Yes.
And you were talking about, 10% of customers are only really ready to buy. You've got the other 90% to think about. How do we engage then? Because this has always fascinated me, the other 90% or whatever the number is for your industry. But how do we engage that 90%? What are some of the strategies that you've seen work well there?
So one of the best ways I've seen and this is what I love to do because I also have worked outside of e-commerce. So I've done a lot of virtual events. I've worked with a lot of clients across the board in virtual events, coaches, consultants, authors, people doing AI that are on the cutting edge, all these different things. So for me, I'm getting to study what works for them. I think something that happens when we get very industry focused is we don't look outside our industry. And if you look outside the industry, you can find things that are working very well and then apply it here. One of the things I've seen is you can run marketing. So whether you're doing meta ads, Google, YouTube, however you do your ads the best. And in that ad, you're not selling anything. What happens is you're just making them aware of the problem. It's like, hey, do you have foot pain? So this goes back to the arch support. It's like, hey, you have foot pain. Most likely it comes from you wearing shoes that don't have arch support. And what happens is then if they click the link, it would take them to basically a one-page funnel where it's explaining the things to watch out for. It's like, hey, these are some of the things you need to watch out for when you're buying footwear is this, and this. And then if you want more information on that, click here, and then they could go to your website. And then they can then on the website where it would take them is it wouldn't take them to a homepage. It would take them to an about page and why your stuff is built and having it showing, hey, this is what's different. This is how we built our shoe. This is the quality of it. This is the arch support in it. So then what happens is that they're going down a literal funnel. So a landing page, they're hitting the landing page, understanding how this is hurting your knees and hurting your back because you don't have arch support and how and ways to overcome that. So look for, and the thing is, even on that page, you're not saying, okay, this is the problem, buy my shoe. Is you're saying this is the problem. When you go look for shoe companies, these are some of the things you should watch for. So you should make sure that they have arch support. You should make sure that they last longer than 30 days. You should make sure that their quality is really good. And then you give them the option. It's like, hey, we also sell this kind of stuff. Yeah. And so that makes them problem aware. It also makes them solution aware. And you also become the solution. Because I've noticed this in the B2B space. So outside of the direct to consumer space is if you make them, so if you're on a sales call and you're talking to somebody, instead of thinking, how can I make them a customer? Is think about how can I help this person the most? So when I just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and this lady was looking to hire somebody. She wanted to hire someone. I said, okay, here's some questions you need to ask an ads agency. She wanted to hire another ads agency. Her last two had just burned her. I said, you need to ask them, okay, with my current account, with my current website, what do you think the conversion rate would be? She had an awful website. So if they start telling you that you can get a 5-10% conversion rate off of that website, or if they say, oh, we don't know, now you know that they don't actually know the numbers. Asking them, okay, across the board with the brands you're working with, what is the average return on ad spend? What is your average ROI? What is your average cost to acquire a customer? If they can't, what's your average click-through rate? Like just asking pretty basic stuff. If they can't give you those numbers, they may not be the best fit. So all I did for her was make her problem aware. Hey, when you're talking to people, make sure to ask these questions so you don't get taken advantage of. And what ended up happening was, does that mean that she ended up working with me? No. But the thing was that she found a solution that works really well for her. And what happens then is she texted me back and said, hey, I decided to go this other direction, but I want to keep you in mind for other projects because you informed me and helped me make this best decision. So now she became problem aware. She became solution aware. She found a solution that worked for her in that time period, but it also lets her know that I'm also a solution in case anything happens with that solution. Yeah. So that's the way that I would structure it to get people to actually down that funnel.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Very good. I think the older I get, Steven, the more I realize the key to selling is just to help people as much as is humanly possible.
Yeah.
And the more you help people, the more value you bring, the more people want to buy your thing, right?
Yes.
So I realized this years ago when I started out in e-com coaching, and I was like, well, this is my IP. This is my secret sauce. I'm not telling anybody that. You have to pay money for that. And then actually I started just by saying, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is my framework. This is my IP. This is, everything that I know. The more I told people, and I'm like, there you go. You've now got everything you need to go away and do what you need to do. The more they came to me and said, great, can you do that for me?
Yes. I heard this amazing quote, but information is free. The implementation is paid. So you're giving away everything. And what happens is, especially people like us, where we have this proprietary product, so we go, yeah, but can I just give away 99%? It's like, but honestly, the majority of people will get that information and do nothing with it. So if you give away 100%, it's going to be actually really high value. You're going to help more people through your marketing than your actual implementation will ever will. Yeah. So you're going to have good, like, people are going to have faith in you to do the thing. Because they're going to hear all these testimonials of people who have never worked with you. They just watched a YouTube video. They got a free PDF that you gave, and it changed their whole business. And what happens is then people will come to you and say, hey, I heard all this stuff. You sound like exactly who I'm looking for. How much do I have to pay you for you to do this? And because most people would rather just pay to get the problem solved instead of trying to solve the problem themselves. Yeah.
It was very, very wise. Very wise. Steven, I need a question from you, bud. This is where I ask you for a question, that time of the show where if this is your first time listening to us and your first time, maybe you've got this far into a podcast, I ask our guests for a question, which I'm going to answer on my social media channels. If you don't follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, come find me at Matt Edmundson, where I'm going to answer the following question. Cue, Steve.
What is the best way that you have found to grow an e-commerce business from starting to sustainability?
Very good. If you want to know my answer to that question, come follow me on social media at Matt Edmundson, like I say, on Instagram or LinkedIn, where I'll be posting my answer to that question at some point in the not too distant future, if it's not already out by the time this episode is. But Steven, listen, how do people, why don't you tell us a little bit about Elevatum, your company, what you do, how people reach you if they want to do that, maybe just tell people how you can help them, and what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yes. So first and foremost, you can find me at elevatum.digital. We went a little new age with the URL, but elevatum.digital is the best place to find me. And what we do is we work with companies usually between $500,000 to $1 million a year who you've gotten to a certain spot. And even as you said in the bio, they just plateaued. You don't really know what to do. You've made the same kind of sales for the last year, for the last 6 months, and you don't know how to scale. So you're trying a lot of things and it just doesn't feel like anything's working. Been there, been two-time founder, grown to over $1 million a year. My business partner has also had a multi-award-winning, multi-seven-figure full marketing agency that he exited. And what we do is we come into businesses and we help them understand the key levers to pull to be able to get past their growth ceilings and help them achieve the growth that they're actually looking for sustainably. So not just getting you more revenue numbers, but actually having more money physically in your bank account.
Fantastic. And where can people reach you?
So elevatum.digital, they're right there. If that makes sense to you, I'm right there. That's a good way to go about it. You can press it. That's my actual calendar. You would actually talk directly to me. And then if you just want to engage with some of the things, I make posts all the time. LinkedIn is by far where I'm at all the time. Every single day I'm on there always and often. So LinkedIn is another great place to find me.
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. I really need to get better at being more consistent on LinkedIn, but that's a personal issue which I now need to resolve. But yeah, Steven, listen, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, man. Thanks for joining us all the way from Oklahoma. I have got lots of notes, as I always do. And, kudos to your mum for kickstarting this whole journey. You can go to your dad and say, Dad, you were wrong, weren't you? Really? As was I, and we've learned. from this whole situation. But it's been an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. What a great conversation that was. Huge thanks to Steven for joining me today. Now, be sure to follow the e-commerce podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some more, phenomenal conversations lined up. And I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. Steven's got to bear it. I've got to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, the e-commerce podcast is produced by Podjunction. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The amazing team behind this comes from Podjunction, including the beautiful Sadaf Bainon and very talented Josh Edmundson, who wrote the theme music. As I mentioned, if you would like to read the notes, transcript, all that sort of stuff, you can find it all at ecommercepodcast.net. or just simply scroll down on your podcast app. But if you'd like to connect with us, subscribe to the newsletter or reach out to me on social media, you can do all of that. Just go find me at Matt Edmundson or follow the links on the ecommercepodcast.net website. But that's it from me. That's it from Steven. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.